Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe and tap the bell icon. The door to the boutique swung open with a soft chime, and Sarah stepped inside, her heels clicking lightly against the marble floor. The air inside was cool, tinged with the scent of high-end perfumes and polished leather. The soft murmur of voices from the staff and a few other customers filled the space, but for Sarah, it was like walking into a sanctuary. This was her world, the world where she was supposed to belong. Or at least, that's what she told herself. She adjusted her designer handbag, the leather warm under her fingers. The dress she wore was the latest from one of the top designers, a perfect fit for her figure. Sarah had always known how to present herself, how to blend in with the elite, how to slip into spaces like this without drawing attention. It was second nature, the kind of confidence that came from years of experience. Her eyes scanned the shelves of the boutique, admiring the carefully displayed clothing. Everything was perfectly in place. Every item a work of art, carefully curated to make a statement. She loved this place. She had shopped here countless times before, always feeling a thrill as she tried on new outfits, each more expensive than the last. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, savoring the luxury of the space. But something felt off today. It was subtle, just a fleeting impression, but it lingered. She couldn't put her finger on it. Maybe it was the unusually cold air, or the fact that the staff wasn't smiling as much as they usually did. She glanced around, but all she saw were the usual well-dressed women who, like her, were likely here for a little indulgence, a little escape from the mundane. Still, that feeling nagged at her, a small whisper in the back of her mind. She approached the racks of dresses, her fingers grazing the soft fabrics as she examined them. She didn't know what she was looking for today. She wasn't in the mood for anything specific. She just needed to buy something. Anything, to justify the trip, to feel like she had spent her time well. It was a strange compulsion, but one she often gave in to. Sarah's hand brushed against a particularly stunning gown, a deep emerald green with intricate embroidery. The price tag was absurd, but she had the means. Her husband, Ethan, had always made sure of that. His success had afforded them both a lifestyle most people only dreamed of. They didn't just live comfortably, they lived luxuriously. A part of Sarah loved that. Loved the life that Ethan had built for them. But another part, a quieter, more honest part, wondered if there was more to her than just being the wife of a wealthy businessman. It was a thought she rarely allowed herself to indulge, but it was there nonetheless. She lifted the dress from the rack, holding it up to her body and stepping toward the mirror. It looked stunning, the perfect shade for her pale complexion. But before she could even consider trying it on, she felt the presence of someone behind her. She turned and found the boutique manager standing there, his expression neutral. "Can I help you, madam?" he asked, his voice cool and professional. Sarah smiled, feeling a flash of irritation. She wasn't a madam, she was Sarah, a regular, valued customer. But she nodded anyway, trying to keep her tone light. "I was just admiring this dress," she said, motioning to the gown in her hands. "How much is it?" The manager glanced at the tag, his expression flickering for just a second before he replied, "It's on sale for $5,000, madam." Sarah's eyes widened. That was steep, even by her standards. But she wasn't about to let a price tag stop her. She had the money. She had the right to buy whatever she wanted. After all, it wasn't just about the dress, it was about the experience. The feeling of walking into a place like this, knowing that the world was at her feet. She had earned it, in her own way. "I'll take it," she said, her voice steady. "Could you wrap it up for me?" The manager nodded, but there was something in his eyes now. Something she couldn't quite place. She watched him walk away, a strange unease creeping up her spine. Why was he looking at her like that? As though she didn't belong here? She shook the thought off and turned back to admire herself in the mirror, but before she could take another breath, the door swung open again. The familiar voice of another customer echoed in the room, but it wasn't their presence that made Sarah stiffen. No, it was the way the manager's face suddenly froze, like a deer caught in headlights. Sarah followed his gaze, feeling her stomach tighten as she saw him staring toward the entrance. A shiver ran down her spine. The person entering the store was tall, imposing. His dark suit fit him perfectly, and his shoes clicked with a confidence that matched his stride. But it wasn't just his appearance that made the atmosphere shift. It was the recognition in the manager's eyes, the shift in the air, as if something had changed. Something Sarah couldn't yet understand. Her heart skipped a beat as the man stepped forward. Ethan. It wasn't just the fact that her husband had entered the boutique, it was the way he looked. The look in his eyes was different, hard, like a man on the edge of losing control. Sarah took an involuntary step back, a cold wave of fear rushing over her. What was going on? Why did he look like this? Ethan had always been calm, collected, the rock she leaned on. But today was different. His eyes were sharp, and his jaw was clenched. His entire posture was tense, as though every muscle in his body was coiled with frustration. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't the Ethan she knew. This wasn't the man she married. The boutique manager, still standing near the door, stiffened even more as Ethan approached. He didn't say anything at first. His eyes scanned the room, and for a moment, it felt like time stood still. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, Ethan's voice cut through the silence. Is there a problem here? The manager blinked, but his composure didn't falter. No, sir. Everything is fine. Sarah's stomach churned. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. She knew something was wrong. Something was horribly wrong. Ethan's gaze didn't leave the manager's face. He didn't even look at Sarah. Tell me, Ethan continued, his voice low but filled with authority, why is my wife being treated like this? The manager opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His face flushed a deep shade of red, and for a split second, Sarah thought he might collapse under the weight of whatever was happening. Ethan's next words came like a punch to the gut. Do you know who I am? The words were laced with so much authority that the room fell silent again. Sarah's heart stopped. The manager's eyes widened in shock, and suddenly, she realized that everything in the room had changed. The game had shifted. The quiet, unassuming man she had married was now someone entirely different, a man whose presence commanded instant respect. But why? What was going on? What did Ethan know that she didn't? The manager looked like he was about to speak, but no sound came out. His gaze flickered toward Sarah, then back to Ethan, then to the door. He was trapped. Whatever was happening, whatever Ethan had said, it had sent the manager into a state of pure panic. And then, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Ethan finally looked at Sarah. His eyes softened, just barely, but there was something else in them now. Something deeper, darker. She couldn't read it. She couldn't understand it. But she could feel it. I'm sorry, Sarah, he whispered, the words barely audible over the thick tension in the air. Sarah opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. Her mind raced, spinning with questions. What had just happened? What was Ethan hiding from her? I need to explain, he said, his voice still low, but filled with something she hadn't heard in a long time, regret. Before she could respond, the manager's voice finally broke the silence. Mr. Westbrook, he said shakily, I wasn't aware. I had no idea. Westbrook. The name hit Sarah like a thunderclap. She hadn't heard it in years. Not since before they were married. Before Ethan had changed everything. Before he became someone else. Her thoughts scattered as everything she knew, everything she thought she knew, began to unravel. The tension in the boutique felt like an electric current, crackling in the air. Sarah stood frozen, her mind racing, but her body refusing to move. Ethan's words had cut through the confusion, but the deeper meaning behind them was still shrouded in mystery. Westbrook. The name reverberated in her mind, but it was like a puzzle piece she couldn't quite fit into place. She turned slowly to face the manager, who was still visibly shaken by Ethan's presence. The manager's once confident demeanor had collapsed into something almost pathetic, as if the very foundation of his world had been shaken. Sarah couldn't blame him. Ethan's sudden shift in attitude had thrown everyone off balance, Sarah included. "What's going on, Ethan?" she finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. The words seemed to escape her with difficulty, as though the weight of the moment had caused her throat to tighten. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes flicked over to the manager, who was still standing awkwardly by the door. The man's hands were wringing together, and sweat was visibly beading on his forehead. Sarah had never seen anyone so nervous before. She felt a strange mix of pity and curiosity toward him, but it was quickly overshadowed by the overwhelming need to understand what was happening. Ethan's gaze softened, but only for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice calm but with an underlying edge that Sarah hadn't heard before. "Sarah," he said, turning toward her, "I think it's time you learned the truth. It's not easy for me to tell you, but it's the only way forward." Sarah felt her heart begin to pound in her chest. The truth? What truth? Her mind raced, and every part of her screamed to ask him what he meant, to demand an explanation. But for the first time in their marriage, she wasn't sure she was ready to hear what he was going to say. The manager, sensing the shift in the room, began to retreat, but Ethan's next words stopped him in his tracks. "Stay," Ethan said coldly, his voice cutting through the air. "You're not going anywhere." The manager froze, his eyes wide as he slowly turned back toward Ethan. "Mr. Westbrook, I don't know what's going on. I had no idea who she was. I swear, Enough," Ethan interrupted, his tone sharp and commanding. "You've made your mistake. Now it's time to deal with the consequences." Sarah's eyes widened. Consequences? What was Ethan talking about? Who was this man, this Westbrook, who seemed to command so much fear and respect with a single word? The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. Ethan turned to Sarah, his expression softening just enough to reveal a hint of something vulnerable behind his usual mask of control. "I never wanted you to find out this way," he said, his voice quieter now. "But the truth is, I've been hiding something from you for a long time. Something that's not just about me, but about you, too." Her breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean? What are you talking about, Ethan?" Ethan looked away for a moment, as though gathering his thoughts. When he spoke again, his voice was steady but laced with emotion. "I'm not who you think I am. The man you married, Ethan, he's a lie." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. She blinked, trying to process what he had just said, but her mind couldn't quite catch up. "What?" she whispered. "What do you mean, you're not who I think you are?" Ethan took a deep breath and walked toward her, his steps slow and deliberate, like a man preparing for a battle. He reached out to touch her arm, but Sarah instinctively took a step back, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. "Let me explain," he said, his voice softening, as though he were trying to calm a wild animal. "I'm not just some businessman. I'm not just Ethan Westbrook. I am the Ethan Westbrook, the one they all feared." Sarah's head was spinning. "Feared," she repeated, as though she couldn't quite wrap her head around the word. She had always known Ethan to be a quiet, reserved man, someone who rarely spoke about his past. He was wealthy, yes, but he didn't flaunt it. He didn't talk about his family or his business in a way that made him seem untouchable. He was normal. He was hers. The man standing in front of her now, however, was someone else entirely. Someone who seemed to carry a weight that was far greater than she had ever imagined. "Who are you really, Ethan?" she asked, her voice shaking with the magnitude of the question. Ethan's eyes darkened. "I never wanted you to know the truth about my family, about who I really am. But you've been pulled into it now. There's no turning back." Sarah took another step back. "What does that mean? What do you want from me?" Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, almost as though he was trying to gather himself, then finally exhaled sharply. "I am part of a powerful family, one that's been involved in things most people would never believe. Things that would ruin the life we've built together. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to be involved. But now," he hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Now, there's no way to keep you safe from it." The words hung in the air, and Sarah could feel the weight of them pressing down on her chest. It felt like the walls were closing in on her, like everything she had known was slipping through her fingers. "What do you mean, keep me safe?" she demanded. "What are you talking about, Ethan? Why are you saying all of this now?" The manager, still standing in the corner, shifted nervously, his hands trembling. Ethan glanced at him briefly before turning back to Sarah. "There are things I can't explain just yet. But there's a reason why you were humiliated here today. It wasn't an accident. This boutique, this place, Sarah, it's part of a larger network, one that my family controls." Sarah shook her head, her mind racing. "I don't understand. How is that possible? What does any of this have to do with me?" Ethan's eyes darkened again. "Because you're not just anyone, Sarah. You're my wife, yes. But you're also tied to this in ways you don't even realize yet. Your family, your bloodline, has its own dark history, a history that's been intertwined with mine for generations." The words were too much for her to process. She felt as though the floor had just fallen out from under her, leaving her suspended in a void of confusion and disbelief. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice trembling now. Ethan took a step forward, his face filled with intensity. "I didn't tell you everything when we first got married. I thought I could protect you, keep you out of it. But now, it's all coming to a head. Everything we've built together is at risk. And if we don't act fast, everything will crumble." Sarah could barely breathe. The walls of the boutique felt like they were closing in on her, suffocating her with the weight of Ethan's words. "I never wanted you to be a part of this world, Sarah," Ethan continued, his voice low and filled with regret. "But now, you're in too deep. And if I don't make this right, if I don't fix the mess I've created, everything we've worked for will be destroyed." The reality of the situation was beginning to sink in, but Sarah's mind couldn't fully process it. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to understand what was happening. But the words stuck in her throat, like they were being held back by some invisible force. The manager, still standing in the corner, cleared his throat. "Mr. Westbrook," he said, his voice shaky, I think it's time to go. Before things get any worse." Ethan turned toward him, his expression hardening. "No," he said, his voice steely. "We're not leaving yet." Sarah looked at Ethan, her heart pounding. "What do you want from me, Ethan? Tell me, please. I need to know." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a sadness she had never seen before. "I want you to understand that everything I've done, everything I've kept from you, it's all been to protect you. But I've failed. And now, the only way to fix it is to bring you into the fold. Whether you're ready for it or not." Sarah's mind was a whirlpool of confusion. Nothing made sense anymore. But one thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same again. Sarah sat in the plush armchair in the boutique, her hands tightly clutching the edges of her purse as her mind tried to make sense of everything that had just been revealed. Ethan, the man she had loved and trusted for years, was not the person she thought he was. He had kept secrets from her, secrets that ran deeper than anything she could have ever imagined. She looked over at him, standing across the room, his face expressionless, yet there was something in his eyes, something raw, something filled with guilt. He was pacing now, back and forth, his hands running through his hair as he clearly struggled with the weight of his own words. The boutique manager had long since left, slinking out of the room as if he wanted to avoid being part of whatever was coming next. Ethan hadn't even acknowledged him as he had slipped away. Sarah could feel the chill in the air, the unease hanging thick between them. "Ethan," she said softly, trying to catch his attention. He stopped pacing, his back still to her, and she could see his shoulders tense, as if preparing for something. She could see it now, the man in front of her was not the same person she had married. The love and warmth he once exuded were gone, replaced with a coldness that she wasn't sure how to reach anymore. He turned to face her, and for a brief moment, his gaze softened. But it didn't last long. "I never wanted this for you, Sarah. You have to believe me. I didn't want you to get caught up in this." His voice cracked, and for the first time, Sarah saw a glimpse of the man who had once been vulnerable and open to her. "Caught up in what?" she demanded, standing up from the chair. Her pulse was racing now, her thoughts spinning out of control. "What are you talking about, Ethan? You're telling me there's some secret world I don't know about. A world your family controls. But I don't understand any of this. I've spent years with you, and you've kept all of this from me." Her voice was louder now, a mixture of frustration, confusion, and hurt. Ethan took a step forward, his eyes full of pain. "I never meant to lie to you, Sarah. But you don't understand. The things I'm involved in, they aren't something anyone can just walk away from. My family, they run things, you don't know the half of it. They've made sure I have a place, a future, and they expect me to uphold certain responsibilities." She shook her head, her chest tightening. "Responsibilities? Ethan, you're talking about secrets, lies. You've been hiding everything from me, and now I'm just supposed to accept it. I never wanted you to be a part of it, but you are now. There's no turning back. I've kept you in the dark for so long because I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought I could protect you. But now," his voice trailed off, and for a moment, he seemed to lose himself in thought. "Now it's too late." Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving him. "What do you mean it's too late? What is happening, Ethan? You're scaring me." Ethan's gaze flickered to the window, and for a second, he seemed to be measuring something in the distance. When he spoke again, his voice was strained, barely above a whisper. "There are things happening that I can't control anymore. People, dangerous people, are involved. And they're looking for me." A cold shiver ran down Sarah's spine. "What do you mean, dangerous people?" His face hardened. "People I've been trying to outrun for years. My family's business isn't just about money, Sarah. It's about power. Power over people, over resources, over governments. And when you're that high up, you make enemies. Powerful enemies." Sarah felt her world start to tilt. She had never thought of Ethan as a man involved in anything even remotely close to that. He had always been the businessman, the quiet, supportive husband who worked hard, provided for them, and kept their lives relatively simple. But now, the man in front of her was a far cry from the person she had married. "I thought you were just, I don't know, a successful entrepreneur," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you saying, Ethan? Are you telling me you're involved in some criminal empire?" Ethan looked pained at her words. "It's not like that," he said sharply. "I'm not a criminal. But I'm not just some businessman either. My family's legacy is built on corruption, manipulation, and control. And I'm right in the middle of it. I've tried to distance myself. I've tried to make a life with you that's different from what they've done, but it's all catching up to me now. It's all unraveling. Sarah took a step back, trying to process what he had just said. She could feel her breath quicken, her chest tightening with each passing second. This wasn't what she had signed up for. This wasn't the life she had imagined when she had said, "I do." "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, "what are you telling me? That everything I thought I knew about you, about us, is a lie? That our life together, our marriage, has been built on secrets? On fear?" Ethan's face twisted with regret. "I never wanted it to be like this. But I had no choice. I didn't want to pull you into this mess, Sarah. But you're already in it. Whether I like it or not, you're part of this now." For the first time since he had entered the boutique, Sarah felt the ground beneath her feet shift. She wasn't just married to a man with a dark past, she was married to someone who was currently tangled in that darkness. And she had no idea how deep it went. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. She wasn't sure what she was asking, what the question even meant. How could she move forward from this? How could she stay with him when everything she had known was now shattered? Ethan took a step closer, his eyes full of intensity. "We fight. We do what we have to do to protect ourselves. But it's not going to be easy. There are people who want to hurt me. People who want to bring me down. And they'll use you to get to me." Sarah felt her heart drop. "What do you mean, use me?" "They'll threaten you," he said, his voice urgent. "They'll do anything to get to me. I've spent years running from them, but they're always a step ahead. And now, they know about you. They know about us." A surge of fear rushed through Sarah. She hadn't signed up for any of this. She had married a man who seemed perfect, a man who had given her everything she ever wanted. And now, he was telling her that their life together had been built on a foundation of lies. The betrayal she felt was suffocating, but it was nothing compared to the fear that gripped her heart at the thought of what could happen next. "What do we do?" she asked again, her voice shaking. Ethan looked at her, his face filled with both determination and sorrow. "We fight back. We do whatever it takes to stay safe. But you have to trust me, Sarah. You have to trust me now more than ever." She didn't know what to say. Her mind was in turmoil, her thoughts racing, but she didn't have the answers. She didn't know how to fix this. All she could do was stare at the man she had married, the man who was now a stranger to her, and wonder if there was any way out of the mess they were in. Suddenly, there was a loud noise from the back of the boutique, a loud crash, followed by the sound of shuffling feet. Ethan's expression darkened, and Sarah's heart leaped in her chest. She knew instantly that something was wrong. "Get down!" Ethan shouted, as he grabbed her arm and pulled her to the floor. Before Sarah could even react, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching quickly, heavy and deliberate. The door to the boutique slammed open, and Sarah's blood ran cold. 3 men stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in dark suits. Their faces were cold and emotionless, their eyes scanning the room as though they were searching for something. Or someone. Ethan's face turned pale as he stared at them. He whispered, "It's them." The realization hit Sarah like a wave. She was no longer in the safety of her own life. She was caught in a world that was far darker than she had ever imagined. And now, there was no turning back. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she lay on the cold floor of the boutique, her body pressed against the ground, eyes wide with terror. The 3 men who had entered the room were the embodiment of danger. Their dark suits and cold expressions gave nothing away. They stood still for a moment, almost as if they were scanning the room for any sign of resistance or escape. The air seemed to crackle with tension. Ethan's grip on her arm tightened as he pulled her closer to him. His breath was shallow, his body rigid with fear and resolve. "Don't move," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the pounding of Sarah's heart. Sarah could barely breathe. Her world had turned upside down in the span of an hour, and now, in the face of these unknown men, she felt the crushing weight of the life she had built with Ethan crumbling around her. This wasn't the man she had married. This wasn't the life she had imagined for herself. The men stepped inside, their shoes clicking sharply against the polished floor. One of them, a tall, broad man with piercing blue eyes, scanned the boutique with a look of disinterest, his gaze settling briefly on Sarah before moving to Ethan. His voice, when it came, was low and smooth, but it carried a threat that made the hairs on the back of Sarah's neck stand up. "We've been looking for you, Ethan," the man said, his words like daggers. "You've been a slippery one, but no one escapes for long." Ethan's eyes darkened, and for a brief moment, Sarah saw something cold and dangerous flash across his face. The man who had once been her husband, the man who had built a life of normalcy and comfort with her, was gone. In his place stood someone much darker, much more dangerous. "I've been trying to stay out of this," Ethan said, his voice steady but laced with anger. "You know that. I've done everything I could to stay away from you and your people." The man with the blue eyes smirked, a cold, calculating look crossing his face. "You've been trying, yes. But we don't let people walk away from this life, Ethan. Not without consequences." The other two men stepped forward, their presence looming over them. One was shorter, stockier, with a scar running down his cheek, and the other was tall, with dark, almost black hair. Their eyes, too, were cold, calculating. "You should have known this day was coming," the scarred man said, his voice gravelly. "You can't run forever. Your family doesn't let you go that easily." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The mention of Ethan's family only made the situation feel more ominous. These men were clearly not just ordinary thugs, they were part of something far bigger, something far more dangerous than anything Sarah could have ever imagined. "What do you want?" Ethan asked, his voice tight with frustration, yet there was a hint of fear beneath it. Sarah could see the cracks in his armor, the man who had always seemed invincible now standing on the edge of a precipice. The tall man stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Ethan. "It's simple. You've been a liability, Ethan. We've given you enough chances to fix things. But now, we're here to make sure you pay for your betrayal. And your little wife," he turned his cold eyes toward Sarah, making her shiver. "She's part of the equation now. You made her part of this life when you married her." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as the man's words sank in. She was part of this? Part of the world she had never wanted to be a part of? The world that had just come crashing down on her with the arrival of these men? Ethan stood up, his face hardening with determination. He pulled Sarah to her feet, never once looking away from the men. "You can't have her," he said, his voice steady. "She's not involved in this. If you want me, you'll take me, but you leave her out of it." The tall man chuckled, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement, it was a laugh of coldness, of finality. "That's not how this works, Ethan. She's already in it, whether you like it or not. Your marriage to her is just one more piece of the puzzle. And you know what they say about pieces, they all fit together in the end." Sarah's heart raced. This was real. These men weren't playing games. And Ethan's calm demeanor was the only thing standing between her and whatever fate these men had in store. "You don't get to make the rules anymore, Ethan," the scarred man said, taking a step forward. "You made your bed. Now you sleep in it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I won't let you hurt her. If you want me, you'll have to go through me." The tall man's eyes flicked to the scarred one. The two exchanged a brief, wordless conversation before the tall man turned back to Ethan. "We don't want to hurt anyone," the tall man said, his voice smooth, but the threat underneath was undeniable. "We just want to make sure you understand the consequences of your actions. If that means using her to get to you, then that's what we'll do." Ethan's expression faltered for just a moment, and Sarah saw the flash of panic in his eyes. The truth was now inescapable, he had put her in harm's way. His world, his family's world, was now pulling her deeper into the abyss. But there was something else in Ethan's eyes too, a fire, a fierce determination that hadn't been there before. He wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. Without warning, Ethan lunged toward the tall man, his fist connecting with the man's jaw with a force that made Sarah flinch. The man staggered back, caught off guard by Ethan's unexpected movement. But he didn't stay down for long. He recovered quickly, his eyes narrowing with anger. "Get him," he shouted, and the two other men lunged toward Ethan, grabbing him by the arms and forcing him to the ground. "Ethan!" Sarah screamed, panic flooding her chest as she rushed toward them, but one of the men grabbed her by the wrist, yanking her back. She struggled against his grip, but he was too strong. "You stay out of this," the man growled in her ear, his breath hot and rancid. "This is between him and us." Ethan was struggling beneath the two men, his face flushed with effort. He wasn't giving up. He was fighting with everything he had, trying to break free from their hold. Sarah's heart ached as she watched him fight. This wasn't the man she had known, but she could still see the fire in his eyes, the man who would do anything to protect her. "Let him go!" Sarah shouted, her voice shaking with desperation. "Let him go!" The tall man finally stepped forward, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips as he watched the chaos unfold. He was enjoying this, enjoying watching Ethan struggle, enjoying seeing him in a position of weakness. "Ethan," the man said, his voice laced with mock sympathy. "You should have known better. No one escapes from this life. No one." But just as the man reached for Ethan, something changed. Sarah saw it, the way Ethan's eyes narrowed, the way his lips curled into a defiant smile. Something was shifting in him. He wasn't going to let this be the end. In a swift motion, Ethan broke free from the two men holding him. He twisted his body, using their own momentum against them, sending them crashing to the floor with a sickening thud. The tall man barely had time to react before Ethan was on him, his fist connecting with the man's chest in a brutal, calculated move. The man stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. For the first time, he looked vulnerable, he looked like someone who wasn't in control anymore. "Get out," Ethan said, his voice low and deadly. "All of you." Sarah stood there, her heart still racing, as she watched Ethan stand tall, the man she had once seen as a quiet businessman now transformed into someone she barely recognized. But in that moment, she saw something else, something she hadn't seen before. She saw the man who would do anything to protect her. The man who loved her. The man who would fight to the very end. The three men exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions darkening. They had underestimated Ethan. They had thought he was weak, but he was anything but. "You're not done, Ethan," the tall man said, his voice filled with fury. "You can't run from us forever. We'll be back. And next time, you won't get away so easily." Without another word, the three men turned and left the boutique, disappearing into the night as quickly as they had come. Sarah stood frozen in place, her body still trembling with fear and adrenaline. She looked at Ethan, her eyes wide with disbelief. He had done it. He had fought back. Ethan walked toward her slowly, his face a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft, yet filled with concern. Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was telling the truth. Everything felt surreal. Her world had just been turned upside down. But in that moment, as she looked at Ethan, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever the future held, she would face it with him. Together. And maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what had been broken.